Good afternoon, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Larry Snively is our mayor, is on vacation, so I'm sitting in for him. Looking for any declarations of conflict of interest. And I don't see anybody acknowledging that they have, so we'll move on. I need an adoption of the published agenda for May the 10th. Moved by Councillor Bjorkman, supported by Councillor Guerin. Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. This afternoon, we're looking at correspondence on the proposed TELUS cell tower. And I think most of us councillors, members of council, are aware of what's going on with this and where it's being placed. And we're just going to have a general discussion here is what I believe is going to happen. All the correspondence is listed. And I'll let anybody that's got a comment on the topic. Bondi.
Thank you, Chair Meloche. I think we know that there's challenges in this file. The proposed location is not Town of Essex property and really isn't under our authority, but I think many of us agree that it's probably not a great location, and I'm not sure what we can do, but maybe we could ask our town staff to look at alternative options within our town, or perhaps even extend that olive branch to the town of Kingsville, seeing if there's any other alternative sites. I just really want to have the conversation and see what we can do for our residents. Thank you.
Councillor Bowman, did you have your hand up?
Yes, through you, Chair. Again, the comments we've got from the various people that sent in the notices. I too attended the site, took a look at it, and the issue really is the closeness of it to the various properties that are around it. I guess from our standpoint, the best we can do is ask the proponents of the tower and through the town of Kingsville, is if they could give us a better setback from the properties to accomplish what they intend to do. And I noticed that some of the things that they really don't look at is disputes with members of the public relating to the proponent's service, which that's really not an issue. The potential effects that the proposed antenna system will have on property values, and that's something they don't look at. And the questions of whether the Radio Communication Act, this document, safety codes and all that thing those are already addressed. So basically, I think the only issue or thing we have to stand is request if they could move the tower a little farther away from their properties or at another location that would serve their position for the tower, but still satisfy the local residents. And I'm not sure there's much else we can do. And looking at all the documentation that comes through, that's about all we could do. So I would think it'd be in our best interest to do exactly that if we could. And moving forward. Okay, thank you.
You've Councillor Bjorkman next.
Thank you, through you, Chair Meloche. Yeah, I think it's just really important that we bring our residents' concerns to the fore, that they've gotten a hold of us and they've said, we want you to speak for us and make sure that Kingsville is taking serious our concerns. So I think we need to represent our residents to the town of Kingsville and say this is their concerns. I think possibly Councillor Vanderdolen is going to speak to this, but I'll just say, there's options to the kind of towers you can have. Like if you have to have a tower, but we all need Wi-Fi, we all need internet. We all agree with that. These are things we have to have. We have these communication devices that we need to use, and that is the technology that we're using right now. So we have to have it. Sometimes it needs to be in our yard, but can we make it so that it doesn't cause an imposition on us? So I think we need to represent our residents to the town of Kingsville with a letter saying, make sure you're taking their concerns into effect when you make this decision. Even though they're not your residents and this isn't in your town, it's still affecting them. So I think a very strong message to Kingsville that our residents are unhappy with where it is, and to reach out to those residents and see if they can do the best thing for them. Thank you.
I have Councillor Guerin next, and then Councillor Vanderdolen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't have my hand up, but I do have a couple of things to say. Thank you. So I don't know, I haven't seen it in any of the emails yet. Would we know if there's any setbacks in place for towers being installed, whether it be in close proximity to residents' properties or even to municipal borders? That's one thing I'd like to know, if they can just put it anywhere they wish or as close to a property line as they wish. I echo Councillor Bowman's concerns and Councillor Bjorkman's concerns. We have to do what we can for our residents. Yes, it's going to be put up in Kingsville, but we need to at least get to the table, get their concerns to the table. But I'd be interested to learn about any setbacks at all with respect to these towers.
Vanderdolen.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Yeah, there's no way that TELUS should be able to get a freebie on rolling over our residents just because they're a few feet from a border and they're just beyond our reach. But, we really have to impress strongly upon Kingsville that they need to understand what our people are being put through here, because we've got border issues for like 12 kilometers with Kingsville. This won't be the last one. But I warn council that telecommunications are a gigantic cash generator for the federal government, and for that reason, they're relieved of all sorts of niceties like setbacks. They don't have to follow garden variety rules that the rest of the world has to, and that's why they're often so difficult to deal with, because they know they've been relieved of all this stuff, and the feds are on their side because they want that cash river to keep flowing. But the people watching council don't know this, but the rest of council does, that I sent pictures to the rest of council about an alternate form of cell phone tower that isn't anywhere near as obnoxious as these big grids they put up. The one I took pictures of three towers in Tecumseh at Les Bronson and Riverside Drive. Those towers belong to Rogers, Bell, and Freedom Mobile. and they're just white tubes. They're about 18 to 24 inches in diameter, and they've got a couple of lumps at the top, but they're not festooned with those panels and dishes, and they're not grids. They're just a white tube, and they're being used in close proximity to residential areas. I'd forgotten I'd seen them elsewhere. There's one at the corner of Cabana and Dougal, right behind the Tim Hortons there, Spago's. And these things are designed to be located within like 20 feet of a fence line. So the one behind Spago's, I bet it's only 40 feet from the nearest house. So, and there aren't major complaints about these things because they look fine. I would think that that's like a very workable compromise. If they put up one of those things, I don't think the residents would be nearly as upset about having a 200-foot rocket ship behind their house. Thank you.
That's a great idea. We all know that, and I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to speak. Okay, we're good. So we know that this is a large corporation that's putting this tower in, and obviously their first desire is to make better service in the area, and secondly is to pick a location that's going to give as much better service to as many people as possible. The third requirement, or not requirement, but third desire on this corporation's list is to try and do it as cheap as possible. So I think that's what's happening here. I think they've probably picked a site that they can install at the cheapest dollar amount. So I agree with what Councillor Vanderdolen is saying. Perhaps we should be sending a letter to town of Kingsville, and maybe perhaps copying each council member and the mayor and deputy mayor individually at their email, because they won't have a meeting now prior to the last date that you're able to send in correspondence to TELUS Communications. And I think we'd like to have some of them send in correspondence to TELUS before the May 16th date. So I agree that the other issue that I see here is that they can possibly put that tower further down the road, farmland, same owner, but he'd have to put in a culvert on County Road 23 in order to get into access further down on the farm. So we can either do it in two ways, I think, is ask for that tower to be placed further down on the farm on County Road 23. And or we could ask for what Councillor Vanderdolen is telling us right now as far as an alternative kind of tower. And I really do like that idea much better. So just wanted to say those words, and now I'm going to leave it up to council to decide what they want to do. Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, Chair Malash. I think that if we say do this other type of tower, they might just go to that other type of tower, where really the issue is probably the location more than the type of tower. So my first option would be, we really would like to have other locations looked at. That would be my first angle, because if we say, we'd rather have this tower, they might just do that tower. Well, really, our residents don't even know about this other type of tower. I don't know if everybody's understanding what I'm trying to say, but I am in favor of sending a letter to the town of Kingsville. And then also, maybe our mayor or a deputy mayor can call some Kingsville councilors or call the mayor and just confirm that the letter is there. We all get tons of emails, so sometimes picking up a phone and calling somebody makes a little bit of a difference. So I'm in favor of that letter. Thank you.
Councillor Bowman.
Just before we decide on this, does the administration have any comments to make on the suggestions that are going here?
Yes, Director Laurie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think this is going to be a collaboration between legislative services, between Rob Auger and I, as far as content of the letter. I did send an email to council last week just to give everyone a heads up, but happy to share it for the public record. At this point, because the application is not with the town of Essex, it's currently with the town of Kingsville, we really don't have any authority to be making any recommendations administratively. So the actual application, we've had conversations with TELUS about a tower on this side of the border, we'll call it. And we proposed locations at that time. Should this letter include verbiage on that, we would be happy to reiterate the recommendation that we stated several months ago, which was along County Road 23, a little bit further away, where the Pepsi site, we'll call it, is, or Essex Home Furnishings. So around that area is what we were proposing at that time. So we'd be happy to work together, Rob and I, on that letter to the town of Kingsville, to their council. But as far as any application, it's not in our hands at this point to be making any decisions.
Councillor Verbeek.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess, it feels like we're punting it along, but it's not even ours to punt. But I definitely support reaching out to Kingsville Council through a letter and perhaps a few phone calls in support of our residents. I think it is key that we, stay in touch with TELUS on this because it affects their residents. I do have one quick question for Lori and about the letter that's already been sent. Was there a response from TELUS about looking at the locations that he's suggested? Has there been a response?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Verbeek, it actually wasn't a letter that we submitted. It was during the application process several months ago. So the application we received through TELUS, I feel like it's been almost a year in the making, and the application process includes certain criteria that we review, not rather the town of Essex, but this through CRINS, which is the radio communications group that reviews applications for wireless towers, and that is done through a federal entity. So we reviewed the locations, which at the time, one was very close to the Johnny Estates subdivision. The other location being proposed by TELUS was on our arena parking lot at the recreation complex. And then we, at the time, had suggested verbally, maybe it was in writing through an email, that the site near County Road 23 and Highway 3 was to be considered. We asked for it to be considered as an alternative. We, wanted to be able to work with TELUS rather than flat out say no. We had suggested some other sites down the road, but they ultimately turned down, that opportunity and looked on the other side of the border.
Thank you, Mrs. Chadwick. Can I just a follow-up then? So I guess in addition to the letters to Kingsville, it would be appropriate for us to reach out to TELUS in a formal letter asking that they look at alternate sites, and then if not, these the different style towers that Councillor Vanderdolen has brought forth, just to go on record, with TELUS asking that they take these things into consideration on behalf of the residents.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I believe the best route here would be to submit a letter and copy the contact individual. Either way, it can be copying Town of Kingsville Council and sending the letter to the contact on the notice as is indicated in the notice, or the other way around, sending it to Town of Kingsville and then copying the individual on the notice. But certainly it's something that we would need all parties to be included in that correspondence.
Thank you, Ms. Chadwick. Councillor Vanderbeek, you're good? Verbeek, Councillor Verbeek, you're good? I'm going to let Mr. Roger say a word here first, and then we'll come back to council for a second.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just real quickly, based on the discussion, I have been writing out a potential resolution in relation to the letter. And what I have right now, subject to change, is that a letter be sent to the town of Kingsville and the proponents with copy to the mayor, deputy mayor, and Kingsville councillors, noting the concerns of town of Essex residents with respect to the proposed location and setback, and asking that such concerns be addressed, including consideration to alternative sites and setbacks, and that such concerns be addressed with appropriate communication to our residents and resolved prior to any final decisions being made with respect thereto. So through you, Deputy Mayor, that's roughly what I have as a potential resolution based on, but it would be to both, to further to the previous comments by Ms. Chadwick, it would be to the proponents as well.
So I have Councillor Vanderdolen, I believe, was next.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yes, that's a great idea. Letter going to both. I'm just suggesting that that we somehow bring up in this letter. This will have to be phrased properly, but we need to bring up in this letter that TELUS kind of owes us. They owe us because we did them a solid in Harrow just last year. They were in a jackpot there. They had nowhere to put a tower because Zuckelman had kicked them off their lease site at the tube mill. And we passed an emergency resolution. I was kind of at site, and they owe us for that. And, you know, by my count on the cell phone tower map, they've got 15 towers in Essex. So this isn't the last tower issue they're going to face with us. You know, we need to be have good neighbors operating here, because there will be future issues. And if Ms. Chadwick is Director Chadwick is writing this letter, I know she'll how to put that. She'll know how to.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderdolen. You cut out there right at the last minute, but I think we got the idea of what you were talking about. Any further discussion? Councillor Bondi, do you have your hand up? I can't tell. Okay. Anyone else to speak? Councillor Guerin?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to clarify. TELUS has negotiated a property in which they want to put a tower up. They had numerous ones that they were looking at in Kingsville and in Essex. They've decided on this property. So they've come to an agreement of some sort with that particular property owner. Let's call that person a farmer. Is it too far along now? Like, we're talking about properties up by Essex Home Furnishings and the Pepsi plant and stuff like that. But I think we're pretty much past that part of it, right? They have an agreement, it looks like, with a resident to put it on that particular parcel, which butts up to our Essex residents and to our borders. And I don't know if they're going to be able to just put that on a different piece of property. And I also understand that it's still going to take town of Kingsville's approval for them to put the tower up. Is that where we're at with all this?
Sorry, Director Chadwick. You want to speak on that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, Councillor Guerin, I think that's about sums it up, except during the public consultation process, which as Deputy Mayor indicated ends May 16th, that's really where all of the, say, comments could sway the decision makers one way or another. So in this case, different than the town of Essex, where we use CRINs, we go through CRINs to review wireless towers. The town of Kingsville, I believe, is the decision maker behind this particular proposal. So they have their own process, their own application review process, and will be making that decision following public consultation. I believe Mr. Auger also circulated the section according to, I can't remember the name of the legislation, but that the decision makers look to certain criteria and in that decision-making process. But yes, I believe that is where we're at with it. The applicant could still end up being denied. It's not set in stone at this point.
So Mr. Auger's suggested a letter or a motion that we're making. Do we want changes or do we want to move forward with that motion? Councillor Garin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think the letter is going to be fine, but I also think because of this time sensitive on this, we're talking about 6 more days. I really think it's a phone call from mayor to mayor and maybe deputy mayor to deputy mayor, however it's going to work, to let them know that, you know, we're opposed to the location of this. I really think we need to get the need to find out where Kingsville and its council kind of stands with this application. But the letter has to go, yes.
Councillor Bjorkman.
Yes, so I will move the letter that Mr. Auger quoted to us.
Thank you. And Councillor Bowman, are you supporting? Before we vote on that, I just want to let you know that I have talked with Mayor Santos, and him and I will be meeting tomorrow at site and we'll have a discussion. I'll let him know that we've got a letter coming. So I think he already knows our you know, we've had a good discussion already yesterday on this, and they understand where we're coming from. So, but I will reiterate that again tomorrow and let them know that there is a letter coming. So all in favor of moving forward with this motion for the letter? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So with that said, looking for someone to move us into the committee of whole.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, part of the motion is to appoint the presiding officer, which prior roundtable meetings has been our CAO.
Mr. Auger, did you want those both done in the same motion?
That's your option. I know it looks like on the agenda we've set it up as 2 motions. It could be as one, to appoint and then to move into the committee for a time period not to exceed to consider those items.
So we'll take a motion just to move into the committee of the whole first. Moved by Councillor Garin, supported by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? That's carried. And then a second motion to have Mr. Nepsey as the presiding over the meeting. Moved by Councillor Bjorkman, supported by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And I will pass the mic over to Mr. Nepsey.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good evening, council and staff. Nice to have everybody here for our continuation of our roundtable series. Tonight, we're going to be talking about development services. And again, just a quick overview of how we got here. Council provided their items. Council ranked their items, and the order of the agenda is set by the order in which the majority of council provided rankings. So 15 minutes a topic, same as the last ones. And I think that's it. So let's get started here. I'll go through each item and then I'll ask the counselor that provided the item to give a bit of a summary, and then we'll get into discussion. So the first item on our list tonight is internet and broadband accessibility. And that was brought forward by Councillor Vanderdonk. So Councillor Vanderdoen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A lot has changed since we last discussed this. A huge amount has changed. I mean, we were kind of people who didn't have decent access at this time last year were desperate, and we saw nothing on the horizon. And I mean, I was actually going to propose that we start spending $1 million a year burying fiber because we have to have this. This is as important as sewage treatment and water at this point. But since then, SWIFT has come through. A whole bunch of neighborhoods are going to get fiber, and ExploreNet has expanded, WaveDirect is expanding, and Starlink has entered the picture. So we've gone from no hope to a whole bunch of options. Several options are now available to us, and more options will be coming in the future. I'd love to know how many people signed up to Starlink. As people may have heard from me before, I did. It was fantastic at the beginning, but it's become a little haphazard because it's in beta. And just like Elon Musk was selling Tesla cars that weren't fully developed when he started, he's right now selling an internet system that isn't fully developed yet either. But that said, it's a lot better than some of the other systems and cheaper. And in response to Starlink entering the Canadian market, ExploreNet, the previous dominant satellite provider, has slashed its prices and lifted its caps and virtually matched Starlink's unlimited bandwidth usage, which is fantastic. So once again, competition is working its magic, where before we had poor choices and we were being gouged and limited. All of a sudden the prices came down, we get more, and the service is better. What a miracle. And the fiber, they said that we were going to be getting the fiber in places like Pleasant Valley and Beach Roads and a few other places within 2 years. We haven't seen any action yet. I don't know if that's because of a shortage of drilling crews, or it just takes this long to map out the fiber routes, but there's been really no budge since last fall. And they say it was going to be in within 2 years. No, even though I have this upgraded satellite system, when the fiber comes through, I'm in one of the approved areas. I'm going to sign up for fiber because it's the superior service. So I think our next step is going to have to be to wait to see what the uptake is in these fiber areas and what percentage of people agree to pay, to sign 2-year contracts and pay. Because then there'll be another expansion after that, or there probably one will be offered if enough people sign up. And at that point, Starlink should be fully operational and much more reliable. And there are other services coming yet. The guy who owns Amazon, he's starting his own, but he hasn't put any satellites up yet. Elon Musk put up 120 in the last 4 days. Bezos hasn't put up any yet, so he's way behind. But the fact remains that right now, if anybody who really wants and really needs fast service in Essex, in the town of Essex, can get it because of these new service providers. And I've heard that more local towers are coming too. So even if you don't want to pay that rate, or you don't like that company for some reason, the options are burgeoning, and we're going to be in much better shape a year to 18 months from now. And it's actually within imagination that everyone who wants fast, big bandwidth in town will be able to get it within 12 months.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderdoen. Ironically, you only blipped once there, so that's pretty good on a discussion about internet and accessibility. So just looking to see, I know Director Chadwick and I have had some discussions. I'm not sure if you want to hear from Nelson as far as if he's got any updates, if that's something you want to hear tonight. I mean, we've got him on the line, so maybe I'll just move to him. Lori?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. One of the updates that I did want to share with everybody is related to our testing. So the SIRA testing that we started, or rather launched in the fall, we at this point have 3,500 tests that have been completed. We've had multiple ISPs, as Councillor Vanderdolen has indicated, that are interested in expanding. And so what ends up happening is Mr. Silvera, our economic development officer who leads this project, is also being contacted for support, for data, for whatever we can do to assist in applications, grant applications that these ISPs are applying for. What is going to be very interesting, I think, down the road is where we take the SIRA testing data from today and we do a before and after. So as Councillor Vanderdolen indicated, we have Cogeco that has sent council some updates. They are intending to be completed their project by the end of 2022. Additional projects provincially perhaps could be funded following that, but it will be interesting to see kind of that before and after depiction of how good are, maybe a resident within that study area or project area currently is getting, and then the after effect. So as Nelson, if you'd like to add anything, Nelson, I know that he continues to meet with ISPs to support them with grant applications. And I know Nelson is, as recently as last week, has also heard from other service providers too, besides Cogeco.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think Lori touched on all the points I was going to touch on, so that's perfect. But I think speaking back to Councillor Vanderdolen's point, it's the competition that's really driving the market. I mean, you look at Starlink as an option now, Cogeco's expanding. The ISPs are going to follow suit, and they're going to have to pick up their boots and kind of match their competition if they want to retain those customers or that customer base, right? So I think that's really important. We continue our conversations here with ISPs, and not just your Cogecos and your Bells, but your Wave Directs, your Explore Nets. That conversation is ongoing. So we're doing our part here in order to make sure that ISPs have the information they need from us, including that data. The data is a huge part of this. There's the national broadband map that the federal government has, and they created these hexagons across the municipality that show, 25 megabyte download speed or 5 megabyte download speeds. Our data actually pinpoints right to the home and shows them the exact test result of what their download speed is. So they're not combined with other homes around them. It's actually very up-to-date information based on their exact location. This really helps some of the ISPs when they're applying for the Universal Broadband Fund or for the provincial ICON funding. Council was updated, I want to say last month or 2 months ago, regarding Cogeco's project. Their contact had sent an email to council regarding updates on their SWIFT project and the potential future funding, federal government funding and provincial funding that could help build up that current project. So if there is, broadband funding through the Universal Broadband Fund or ICON, they could potentially do shoot-off projects off of that SWIFT funding. So I think, when we talk about projects in the future, like I mentioned before, and like Councillor Vanderdolen touched on briefly there, it's really the competition. So a lot of those ISPs are starting to increase their service or reduce their prices, provide a more reliable service. It's all about bridging the digital divide, right? And we touched on this before, our residents in our urban centers, they're okay. It's really the rural areas that are kind of untapped. And we're working on that. Like the SWIFT funding for Essex through Cogeco, that's going to be, providing over 1,500 homes with fiber access. That's incredible. That's a great first step. It's happening faster than I think we imagined. I thought that was going to take a lot longer. But the fact that it's going to be coming before 2022, I think that's, or at the end of 2022, that's really, really great progress. So I'll leave it at that. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Lori Nelson. Any other questions, comments on this topic? No? Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the next topic. The next topic is the mayor's and he had a general development incentives item. I had a discussion with the mayor prior to him going on vacation, and he just doesn't want development and incentivizing developers to fall off. He's it's very important to him to push development within the town, and he wanted to have a discussion on, you know, what we're doing and what more we can do. So with that, I'm going to go to Lori, Director Chadwick, right now, and have her do a bit of a, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to call you Mr. Chair now. We have some great incentives. I mean, as Nelson likes to say, it's where we belong. Essex has got some great programs in place to retain businesses, attract businesses. We have many marketing efforts as well that encourage businesses to expand within the municipality, existing businesses, as well as attracting new ones, and working closely with our regional partner, WEEDC, which is now Windsor Essex WEEDC Economic Development Corporation. But to speak to certain incentives, we're all very familiar with development charges. Development charges here in the town of Essex until the end of, August 28th, 2024. Development charges for institutional, commercial, and industrial projects, so new construction, continues to be waived until that, the expiration of the current DC bylaw. So again, August 28th, 2024, spread the news, share the news, and I hope that someone quotes me in the media on that. So industrial, commercial, and institutional continues to be waived until such time. Development charges for single and semi-detached in the Harrow settlement area, so not the ward boundary, but rather our settlement area as per the official plan, those development charges continue to be waived fully until the end of this year. And then furthermore, by 75%, so that's a great discount, a great coupon, 75% for another year. And then following that, 50% off, and then 25% until the bylaw expires. So this is kind of that incremental incentive to say to developers, which we did back in 2019, or before that actually, come develop in Harrow. We'd like you to, we're incentivizing you by looking to Harrow as an opportunity and waiving those DCs. So beyond the end of this year, it's still a great discount, 75% waiver for development charges within Harrow settlement area. We also offer, as we're all familiar with, community improvement plan grants. So the community improvement plan programs, right now, as we're all aware, we've essentially put an end date to Essex and Harrow CIP programs to be able to fund our beautiful streetscaping projects. So the community CIP programs expire at the end of this year for those two, say, boundary areas. And then the Colchester County Road 50 CIP, however, it does continue that program until around 2027 or 2028. We were going to find that clause, but we believe it's a 10-year program. It was implemented in 2018, which would mean it's likely to expire in 2028. Those incentives as well, similar to how we've seen in Essex and Harrow, have been off the ground and running in terms of facade improvements or outdoor cafe, as well as incentives for building permits and consulting services for certain great projects in Colchester and along County Road 50. So I hope that gives everyone a flavor of what sort of development incentives are out there. We all continue to work with our developers, our commercial enterprises as well, and industrial developers within the town as well. So we all work in tandem, or rather the four of us especially. I have Kevin Carter here as well as Rita Jabor. We often work hand in hand with Nelson to work on those, say, commercial developments that are looking to expand or develop here in town. So we have that baton that's always passed between us all. Okay, so that's it for me. Chris, if we want to open it up.
Sorry. I think it's also important to note, it might not be an incentive in terms of a policy, but in terms of the work that the team does with developers and with proponents, and ensuring that they get their applications in and helping them navigate, whether it's the ministries or the IRCAs. We do everything we can to promote and get them where they need to be. So I'll open it up for questions, comments, additional. Councillor Bjorkman, and then Councillor Vanderdoorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, we had a conversation a while back about infill development, and we were looking to incentivize infill lots, and I guess the conversation got to the entire town of Essex. So of course, when we counted all the infill lots that were available, it was some millions of dollars that we were going to be out should somebody go out and do them all. We know that's not the case, but we know that there are areas that people are interested in. And I'm just wondering, did we have any further investigation into that? Or is that something that council still needs to drive?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bjorkman, thank you for that. No, not since we officially made, or rather council officially made the decision to not incentivize those infill that we completed an inventory for back in, I want to say December. So we brought forward that report to council in December. We certainly would be willing to look at it again. I think it depends as well on council's flavor. We already heard from this particular council that it's not something that we want to proceed with. So Councillor Bjorkman, it's not something that we looked further into because we did not receive that direction.
Councillor Bjorkman, further?
Yes, let me just follow up that. So, and that was the case, that we looked at the entire town of Essex for infill. And I think, I still think it's worth looking into in our settlement areas, that the infill lots have the same DC charges as brand new builds. And I would contend that there is not the amount of cost for an existing street that's already got sewers at the road, it's already got water at the road, everything's there. There's a road already there. I understand that part of that buy-in is for the parks and your fire department, your police department, all those things. But that is the areas that we have right now. We are filling up our subdivisions, and the places that are left for us to bring families into existing neighborhoods are those. So I would challenge council to consider the thoughts of doing that. And we've had that conversation already, but I don't want it to go away. I want people to think about it, and I may come knocking on your door to talk about it. But I think we need to keep that in front of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bjorkman. I've got Councillor Vanderdoorn and then Councillor Verbeek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I partially agree with Councillor Bjorkman, and I think I mostly disagree with the mayor when he left us with a message that we have to keep these things. The reason we have developed the reason we were giving away development charges was that nothing was happening here. Nothing was being built for decades, and we had the long drought, and we had to use that as bait to attract people. Well, that drought is over. All kinds of construction in the pipelines and has started. And as Councillor Bjorkman brilliantly described in our discussion a year or two ago, when you give away development charges, it's like putting all the services of the town on sale. Access to everything we have is on sale, free to these developers. But it's not really free to the town. We have to make other taxpayers pay for it. And that's why development charges are like kryptonite. We should avoid them at all costs. Now that we've got the mill going again and developers have confidence in us and they're building houses, great, let's keep that going. But you don't want to keep giving away the development charges because, as I said, again, you're selling access to all our services for free. I mean, giving it away, and you're charging little old ladies on pensions full rate to pay for that. Now, that was an emergency measure we had to use when there was no construction. Now we've got developments of hundreds of homes already underway, so we should not be doing that. And this is, I'll get back to where I said I partially agree with Councillor Bjorkman. We should maybe consider some of these on these fill-in lots because it's not as expensive we're not giving away as much. So I would consider it there. But I think what we're doing, this gradual phasing out of the development charges is perfect. It's a brilliant idea. We have to wean the developers off. I mean, they're selling what used to be $150,000, $200,000 house is now going for $700,000. We should not be incentivizing multimillionaire development companies on the backs of little old ladies paying high taxes. That's just wrong. So I think we're on the right track.
Thank you, Councillor Verbeek.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm just gonna, before I pose some of my questions here, I need to get clarity after listening. It's outside of Harrow, we are not waiving any development charges for housing development, correct? It's only for the industrial and institution and commercial, correct?
Through you, Chris, actually, just to add on, there are incentives for residential in the form of affordable housing. So the definition of affordable housing, so we need to be careful that those are those development charges would be not waived, but were exempt rather under the Act. The other one is second dwelling units. So that's coming up. So second dwelling units will soon be, although under the Act, it does supersede the bylaw, but we would be waiving development charges for second dwelling units as well. But residential wise, single family and semi-detached, they're only waived within the Harrow settlement area, correct?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I thought. And yes, affordable, attainable housing. Let's do whatever we need to do to get more of it, right?
One more thing, and Rita Jabour, our manager of planning services. Sorry, Kim. What about apartment buildings, Rita?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was waiting for my camera to turn on. Yes, apartments are also waived as well, but just the municipal wide. That doesn't include the water and wastewater charge.
Thanks, Rita. Okay, so I get that you're saying it's a really great thing that until 24 we're waiving all development charges for the industrial, commercial, and institution, but I hope we reevaluate them because, as Councillor Van der Dolen pointed out, things are booming right now. I wanted to just follow up. My comments were to follow up Councillor Bjorkman's. He's right. He did champion this cause in the past, and I supported it back then, and it was just narrowly defeated. It sounds like people are seeing a little more value in okay, so if we don't just, waive the development fees for our infill lots across the whole municipality, maybe if we do look at it again for just inside our settlement areas, because a lot of these services are already covered and people aren't looking at those infill lots. And if we do it as a council a year or 18 months at a time, and we see that we're losing all kinds of potential development charge dollars, then we just reevaluate it. We just claw it back. But for now, I'm still in support of that. And if Councillor Bjorkman wants to, small it down and just say in the settlement areas, I would be fully in support of that.
Thank you, Councillor Verbeek. Councillor Guerin.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So just speaking to Ward 1, we should probably update those infill properties. Quite a few have been built on now. Outside of the 9 or 10 properties that were in the old cooperative housing project area off Fairview, quite a few have been built on. So a lot of people, though, that aren't building on them, sometimes it's just they own the property and they were going to will it out to a child. Now that kid doesn't want it, they built somewhere else and they just don't want a neighbor. Some maybe want to build, and right now they can't afford the sorry, 1 second. They can't afford to build on it with the price of lumber now and et cetera. So maybe it's just timing in some cases, but I have seen in Ward 1 quite a bit of movement on those infills, and it was done without any incentives per se. Settlement areas, to Councillor Bjorkman's point, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's a major issue, if there's that many properties there that are sitting there idle and we got to get some movement. I'd entertain that, or at least some type of a partial incentive for them. But I know maybe the urban centers or Ward 1 in particular, I don't think the incentives are really going to drive the people to make a decision one way or the other built.
Thank you, Councillor Guerin. Councillor Bondi, you're next, and then we're nearing the 15 minutes, and I'm okay to extend because I think we're close to maybe formulating some direction here. So, Councillor Bondi.
Thank you. I believe it kind of ties into one of our other points is affordable housing. I would be up to revisiting the development fees on infill lots, but only if those infill lots are semi-detached. Like it ties it, we want housings and we want some more semi-detached housing. So, you know, we do have a lot of infill lots, and not every infill lot is going to be developed on and needs to be developed on. But if we have an infill lot and somebody's going to build on it, we say, hey, like, can you build 2 instead of 1? That would be a way I think I could justify more development fees. Because I'll be honest, I was big on waiving development fees in Harrow, and now I see how much it's costing us on the other end. And it's kind of, the pendulum's kind of going back this way. Like we know as a council, and I think we're hearing those messages, that we have been a very development friendly council, and we're seeing results from all of the hard work from our staff and our community and our council pushing. But now I think we have to go back a little bit, bring the pendulum back, and start to strike that balance between when people want to come to our town, we're the happening place to be, and you have to pay your part to belong here. So it is time to look at that balance. At the same time, I want to encourage affordable housing, and that could potentially be semi-detached only on infill lots, not semi-detached in, you know, like a brand new $500,000 subdivision. But if there's a couple lots in Colchester, a couple lots in McGregor that are infill, can we look at, you know, just a specific bylaw for semi-detached? They're going to pay one set. We asked them to pay one set of development fees. So we're getting something out of them, and then they're building 2 homes. So that's where I would like to go with that. And it kind of ties into affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bondi. Yeah, I think, I mean, the general in terms of development incentives, it is getting into our next topic, which is affordable housing. Topic further down, which is identify development fees on semi-detached. But with respect to, I guess where I kind of want to go is in terms of the infill, which seemed to be the main part of the discussion at the beginning. Is there any direction, Councillor Bjorkman, that you would like to see out of this meeting with respect to that infill? I mean, if you think it's going to be tied to affordable housing or development fees on semi-detached, we can tackle it then. But is there something specific that you want to see out of that tonight, or you just want to make sure it's on everyone's radar moving forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yeah, my main part here, because it was defeated in council. You can't bring things back that we moved on and 2 months later go, okay, I'm going to take another shot here and go back at it. We need to have a new idea. It has to be a new. So I think tying it together with affordable housing and with semi-detached is probably a better way to go, because it's a different idea. It's a different approach. And it actually limits how much we're going to expose to the market and to how much that we would end up taking in there. And generally speaking, if you put a semi-detached on a lot, the 2 houses together may be more than a single house, but it'll be much more affordable as individual units and waiving those development fees. So I think that's something that would tie in very well with the detached housing.
So I guess hearing that, I see Lori's.
Thanks, Chris.
I'll go to you in a second, Lori.
Oh, okay.
I think I guess we can move on from this topic to the next one, which is affordable housing, but I'll let Lori go in case she's got another path to take.
Sure. I was just going to say that at the December 2nd, 7th, somewhere around there, council meeting where we presented council with the attainable housing report. Within that report, we identified certain options for council for waiving development charges. One of those options, if we get a chance to go back to the report or yourselves individually, the option to waive for semi-detached was considered at that time. So we looked at 98 ready to build, semi-detached infill in our settlement areas. We didn't look outside in, rural areas. We looked at the settlement areas anyways. And there were 98 that were considered ready to build at that time. And those infill infill lots were the option, I guess, was there to either build by right, permitted by right for semi, or to rezone for semi as well. That option there, the maximum total at that time was $247,000 in development charges for soft services only. And then waiving 50% was another thing we did. So it's a waiving 50% for infill soft services at that time. So just as a point of information for everyone, that it was something that we did consider.
That's good. Thank you, Lori. I think if you can you resend that report to council as well? I think maybe based on tonight's discussion, maybe it'll spark some interest. Take another look at that and see that information there. So really good discussion. I think we'll move on to affordable housing because we've already kind of rolled into that a little bit, but I'll let Councillor Bondi, if you want to provide a little more detail maybe and a little more direction on where you were thinking and what you were where you were headed.
Thank you, CAO Nepsy. I think it's just that conversation we need to keep having the conversation about affordable housing. And I know that an article just came out that Windsor is one of the more affordable cities in our area, but we all know people every week are messaging us about housing. I get asked all the time because I own rental properties, do you have a place that's free? And I don't. And so I still believe we are in a housing crisis. And I think we are doing a little bit, of course, the secondary dwelling units are going to help. This also ties into the tiny homes. I get asked about tiny homes a lot. So all of them kind of tie in together. And I think it would be good to have a document or have a page on our website that talks about what we can offer, like secondary dwelling units, multi-residential, how we're waiving the multi-residential development fees for apartments. Really let those developers know, like we need more apartments. Like Elroy Manor in town, I need a couple more of those, right? So just we need to let our residents know that we recognize that affordable housing is still at crisis level and just keep having that conversation on how we can move the baton farther. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bondi. Yeah, no, we definitely, I know firsthand, anytime Lori and Nelson can chat with developer looking to put in like a Weston Bakery or an Elroy Manor type, they're pushing that and letting them know of any incentives and any partnerships that they could find that way. So, but Lori, you want to provide a bit of a summary on affordable housing? I don't know if you have, and then we'll go and open the floor there.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Nepsy. So I think Sherry, you hit it on the mark there, is that we still just need to talk about it. We need to educate, and we need to ensure that it's always on the forefront of our minds. We are considering second dwelling units now, so that that project is ongoing, and hopefully we'll be bringing forward those regulations for another crack at reviewing with council. Those second dwelling units are just one more option for us to be able to give to our residents. And we're not saying that you have to. We are saying that it's just one more option, trying to make it easier. So I think that's really what I want to drive to all of you, is that we can do what we can do. We do it all. We do. I believe that the town is so progressive in that we're usually the first at the starting line to offer some incentives and offer some policy changes, and to be kind of really open to development. The other option that we talked about a while ago is zoning for tiny homes. I don't want to jump to that topic just yet, but that's something that we will be bringing forward in the near future, which then ties into something called land lease communities. We talked about this during our attainable housing presentation. The land lease communities is something like a mobile home park, although not so much, doesn't have to be mobile homes. They can be tiny homes. They can be single family dwellings. Land lease communities mean that a corporation owns a giant tract of land, and the resident owns the structure, whatever that structure is. So land lease communities, there was a developer, I won't name anyone, but there was a developer that was very keen on this. And I put that individual in touch with a land lease corporation, we'll call them, who has been developing these all across Canada. We also know them as retirement communities, almost like resorts, where you only own the structure. So it's something that we can provide opportunities for developers, but again, it's that we can do a ton of things, but it's the development community that, you need to knock on our doors as well and say, hey, I hear that you guys are open for business in this regard. Point me in the right direction. So that's the one idea that we talked about. And then lastly, we did talk about this as well to make things a bit more affordable and gives, I guess, folks, developers, more of a range of opportunity is to eliminate the R1 zoning, still allow for single detached, of course, but to encourage more affordable housing throughout the municipality by not solely making it single family, which are more expensive depending on the structure. So that was something else we talked about as well. But anyway, that's it.
All right, thanks, Lori. I'm going to go to Deputy Mayor Malash. He had his hand up. But before I do that, I think it's important to know there's a big difference between affordable and attainable housing. And sometimes I think people get confused when they hear affordable. They think, cheap necessarily, but there are certain rules or defined guidelines in terms of what the government considers is affordable housing. And maybe after Deputy Mayor Malash speaks, Lori, you can get into the definitions a bit on what that I think it's 80% of market rental rate or something to that effect. But Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Chair. So what I'd like to bring forward is that I've talked to a few developers that are interested in the whole concept of affordable housing, but it's difficult right at this point in time because of the prices of materials that have just skyrocketed. So a piece of lumber that used to, like a year ago, that was $3 is now $8.50, almost triple what we had in prices a year ago. So there's a number of developers that are interested in what Essex is trying to push in affordable housing. It's just they can't do it right now and still be affordable because of the fact that the construction materials have skyrocketed. So I think you will see this happen. And I think that we have to continue our push as a council, if this is something we really believe in, to push that message that, we're open for business on affordable housing here in Essex, and look for some creative ways in making it even easier than what it is in any other community, so that this is the community of choice for affordable housing. I know that we have a lot of residents here that would love to have the ability to stay in Essex, but a lot of residents are having to go elsewhere where they can get something that there just isn't anything here. There's nothing smaller and there's nothing affordable. So rentals and apartment buildings, all of those good things, they're just so expensive to build right now because of the fact construction materials have jumped in price through this COVID period.
Deputy Mayor. I've got Councillor Bjorkman, then Councillor Vanderdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, just thoughts. And I think a lot of times with affordable housing, people think of it being supplemented. People think of geared to income, that sort of thing. And unfortunately, that's not something as a town we can provide. And I think it's important that residents understand that is not a mandate that we can do. I believe even the ones that we've had, one of the projects somebody brought to us, there's still a provincial component to that. And to Director Chadwick, if I could just get verification on that. We were looking at the one where it would be like a row of homes with a shared parking lot. They were smaller, but it was a provincial program that allowed the developer to own it for 20 years and then sell it later. I don't believe that was a municipal program. I believe it was provincial. Is that correct?
Okay, I see Rita, because I bet Rita knows exactly what you're referring to. I don't know if it was prior to my time. Rita?
Through the chair to Councillor Bjorkman, that was prior to Lori's time. That's a piece of property on Maidstone. So yes, they were applying under a provincial grant program, nothing under our municipal incentives.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification. I just think it's important that we share that with our community, that there isn't a program that we have, there isn't something we can do to supplement rates or to supplement income. What we're trying to do is get developers to come in and use provincial programs to create the affordable housing that we can have. That's really the only way we can go. The attainable housing is something that's a different story that we can hopefully do through incentives to the developers. But affordable is a very difficult, that word it brings on so many different connotations. And it's generally expected to be geared to income or supplemented. And those are two things that we as municipality just can't do.
Councillor Vanderdoen. Oh, I think he is frozen. We will come back to him, I think. Anybody else wanting to comment on the affordable housing topic or where you want to head as a council? There he is. Councillor Vanderdoen.
Yeah, somebody was up there on a satellite with a wrench fixing it. That was a long blip out. I just want to add a few thoughts. I think residents should be reminded, if they don't already know, that the municipal government is the smallest, weakest, most powerless level of government. And here we are trying to fix a housing issue, which is essentially caused by the biggest, richest, most powerful level of government, Ottawa. We don't want to belabor all the causes, but I mean, there's a lot of financial levers and things, a lot of stuff is going on financially in Ottawa that's led to this housing crisis and this lack of affordable housing for our children and grandchildren. Those of us who are in houses are fine. But there's so little we can do because we don't have the tools and the levers that they do. I mean, the province throws a few $100 million at building new towers in Toronto, but they really don't do much for us out here in the hinterlands. And it is ironic that Essex really has been one of the most affordable places to live for the past 30 or 40 years in the region. If you wanted an attainable housing, Essex was the place to come. I mean, how many trailer homes do we have? 1,500. We've already been the leader in attainable housing, and I believe that we should continue to work for this. This is the most important crisis facing us as a small government is housing and the lack of it, and the lack of people being able to come here and live where they want to live. But I also want to point out the irony of the tiny house movement. That the fact is that for 50 years, almost every activist group was opposed to small housing. They were opposed to small lots. They were opposed to trailers. They were opposed to anything that was attainable or affordable. And they seem to have suddenly flipped in the past 5 years, and now it's their holy grail. We could have been much further ahead had the so-called municipal activists not been preventing us from building more attainable housing 10 or 20 and 30 years ago. I mean, not so much in Essex. We have more of it, but we could have been further ahead. Oh, and I also wanted to say that Director Chadwick, that idea of land lease communities, that is a fantastic idea. We should look into that. That might be ideal for us because we have some really choice sites which might lend themselves perfectly to that land lease thing, which by the way has been the way half the housing in England has been built for the last century. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderdoen. Correct me if I'm wrong, Laurie, though, it still has to be driven by a developer who do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely driven by a developer. And there are corporations that partner with developers that, for example, may be new to these land lease options. So if there are any developers that are listening, or you're in contact as councillors with developers that are keen on this option, there are corporations that partner with developers to do this very thing.
Okay, good. Thanks. Councillor Bondi, anything further you want to add to this topic?
No, it was a good conversation, and it leads us right into tiny homes. So.
All right, keep your mic on.
Okay, just tiny homes. I know Ms. Chadwick alluded to doing something with bylaws around tiny homes, but it's something that's come up. I get asked this one all the time too. Like, can we build tiny home subdivisions? Can I put 2 tiny homes on a lot? So I just want to see, and I know that over the years we've received correspondence from different municipalities, and I even know, like, even at one of the meetings, the mayor and I were both saying we need to do this. So I really want to see how we can do this, because this is not secondary dwelling units. This is something different, right? This is, you have a tiny lot, you want a tiny home. Sometimes less is more. So just wanting to see where council's appetite is on this topic.
So Lori, sorry, I'm off. My mic was off. I'm going to go to you, Lori, first, and give a little bit of a summary, and then I see council. But maybe you can answer some of her questions in terms of what does this council have to do in order to get it to that point.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Councillor Bondi and everyone that's at the table. It's a great topic, and no, we can't talk about it enough. I mean, it's something that we see happening across the continent. I think it's in our own backyards. It's something that we're waiting for. So it's not necessarily a bylaw that we would be bringing forward. In fact, it's an amendment to our existing zoning bylaw that would be in line with the Ontario Building Code to allow for a smaller dwelling. So right now, our zoning bylaw has a certain dwelling size as a minimum. I don't remember the number, but it's not in line with the Ontario Building Code, which actually should be, and we should be in line. We should have the same dwelling size. So what we're proposing in the very near future, I've seen the final draft of it, and it looks great. This housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment will, amongst other things, it will include one section on the removal of the minimum dwelling size in the zoning bylaw so that the OBC, the Ontario Building Code, takes precedent. The Ontario Building Code states that the minimum dwelling size shall be 240 square feet. Itty bitty, but still doable. So as far as tiny home communities, however, so I mean, you can have a 50-foot lot by 100 and have a tiny home and have a ton of green space and amenity space. But I don't think that's the purpose for a lot of these residents that are keen on building tiny homes. As far as a tiny home community, so let's go back to what we just talked about, the land lease option. So the land lease option is something that if there is a developer that's keen on, developing a community of tiny homes, we would receive that application through, if the proper zoning is in place, of course, for residential. We would receive those even a single family residential. That's what a tiny home is a single family dwelling. So those tiny home communities would be received through the planning division, and we would review through a site plan control application is my initial take on it. However, if the opportunity or the option rather is to subdivide, then you're looking at the plan of subdivision, and we would have to look at the minimum lot area for residential dwellings. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at when it comes to tiny home communities, but there are opportunities even to look at our existing 3-season accommodations. Down in Colchester is a perfect example. Is there opportunity to convert the 3-season accommodations to all season, depending on services, depending on available services, and as well as sanitary needs, et cetera. So is there an opportunity to make those into an all-season tiny home community? There's also an opportunity to maybe even expand upon, I think Clees Beach is one example where perhaps if that developer is interested in a land lease community for tiny homes, we could look at that as well. So all we're doing here in the zoning bylaw is removing that minimum dwelling size to make sure that we're in line with the OBC. I would like Rita, if you could, Rita, is there anything else that you want to add before we do open it up to council on tiny homes?
Through the chair, no, I think Lori summarized it well. We're doing all we can to maximize what the province is allowing us to do under the provincial policy statement with second dwelling units, with this decrease in the minimum size under the Ontario Building Code to combat the very complex, affordable / attainable housing crisis. So again, we have zoning bylaw amendments proposed, an official plan review where we're going to look internally and see what land we already have that can be maximized for this potential without having to go beyond those boundaries just yet.
That's great. Yeah, because I think it's important to note the difference between minimum dwelling size and minimum lot size and the reasons behind those, right? In terms of potential for septic systems, those other things. So those are those additional things that you need to think about. Yes, you can have a small house, but the lot has to contain or be able to contain sewage. And I guess we'll have to consider those factors. So I've got Councillor Verbeek, then Councillor Bowman, then Councillor Vanderdolen. So Councillor Verbeek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be honest. Thank you, Lori. You answered both my questions very clearly.
There you go. Thank you very much. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you. And through the chair, I guess if you look back, mobile home parks were the first item on the agenda for our communities, then the townhouses, and now it appears that the tiny homes are coming forward. And I think if you look at each one of those that came forward, they came with unique issues that the municipalities had to look after. And I think as long as they're in communities on their own, those unique issues can be looked at and answered and handled. And I think the tiny homes fit in that same category. And I can see a great opportunity for a developer to do exactly that. Take a chance and jump at one of those. Again, the cost of putting the services in will be unique, and it'll be, sort of a trial and error type thing as move forward. But it's an opportunity, I think, that our municipality certainly should embrace and move forward with. So I think if you have the tiny homes interspace through the community, you may have issues. However, if they're in tiny home estates, if you sort of call them that, even with the land leased communities, it's still an option that I think would make our municipality unique, and I think be a betterment for all of us. So I'm really in favor of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Vanderdolen.
Thank you. Yes, I said most of what I intended to say last time. I just want to clarify that despite I keep belaboring the irony of this debate, but I am in favor of this. I'm completely in favor of the tiny homes, however it's done, however we get new housing on. I mean, there might be some social problems down the road from them, but the social problem of lack of housing right now is so important that we should just do it. So I just for anyone who might be listening, if they think that if they're trying to calculate the support from council, I think you've got a majority support on this council.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderdolen. Councillor Guerin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree. Councillor Vanderdolen hit it right on the nose there. I think that speaking to a lot of the youth, the 20 plus that just finishing school, they have jobs, they're at entry level positions. They're looking for places to live. They can't afford these homes. And that's all coming down to the market right now and supply and demand. It may change up the road, but many of them I talked to would love the opportunity to live in a home that's, even some seniors I speak to live in something that's a little bit smaller, that they don't have to manage yards. The land lease idea, similar to what we do with trailer parks, is great with shared amenities. But some of these people are saying they'd be willing to pay up to $250,000 for their own home, even if it is only a one-bedroom open concept type of a place with a porch and sitting on less than 500 square feet. So I think if there's a will and a way to do this and to get some developers to buy into that idea of these tiny home communities, I really find that attractive. Sparsely putting them here and there, I'm on the fence on that, but I definitely like the idea, the opportunity of a community, 40, 50 modular type homes, something along those lines wouldn't even take up that much space really. Done right, I can vision it. It's a great idea. So very open-minded to it. Thanks.
Councilor Garen. So Lori, just in terms of listening to council here, they want to investigate, and by doing the changes to the OP to allow the size, is there any other steps that they need to take to see their vision, or does it come down to the developers needing to come, want to do this, I need approval for this?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think that once we get our policies and our regulations in line with being open for business for tiny home communities, then it would be really up to a developer to come forward with the proposal. So we're on the right track to get those regulations and policies in place. So we're doing our part as a municipality. Rita, again, will be bringing forward a report to council in the very near future on that housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment, which will include some details on tiny homes to get us ready for that. Rita, is there anything else to add on what else we need to do to be ready for development?
Through the chair, no, just I think everybody's enthusiasm is great. We'll bring forward the regulations, and then following that is just promotion.
Thanks, Rita. Deputy Mayor Malash has a question or comment.
Yeah, just one quick question to either Ms. Jabor or Director Chadwick. Is it possible that the town of Essex could own a piece of property and have a developer come in and develop on that piece of property, and we be the long-term leasee of the property?
Rita's hand up. Go ahead, Rita.
Through the chair, that's absolutely possible. It's actually a strategy a lot of municipalities employ, even for industrial land. So that's definitely a possibility.
Okay, Councilor Bonnie, is that good?
Yes, just to the deputy mayors, I might have a piece of property located somewhere where I love. So, yeah, no, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, good. Great. Really, really great discussion. The next one is Airbnbs. Councilor Bonnie, this one's yours as well.
Thank you, CEO Nepsi. I just think that we're still getting complaints, and I know that it's coming, but I still think it's healthy to have the conversation, updating our residents to know where it's coming. I know Councillor Bjorkman's been dealing with policing issues in the community, just wants to know what's going on and when the status is, and just a quick touching base if we can. Thanks.
Director Chadwick.
Thank you, CAO Nepsi. So thank you, Councillor Bondi. I'm glad that we're having this conversation out in the public besides just emails back and forth. So even as far as last week, we have an update since our email to you, Council, last week. So we are working behind the scenes, as we've shared with you, to review, evaluate, and to draft the various components of this multifaceted project. So for anyone that is listening in, the project does not just include provisions in the zoning bylaw, but it also includes what could potentially be a licensing system for short-term rentals. So that includes a lot of consultation with our Legislative Services Division, as led through our clerk, Rob Auger. We also do need to do a ton of work with our bylaw enforcement division under the leadership and guidance of our manager, of Building Services, Kevin Carter. So multifaceted, to say the least. We are very close. When I say very close, this week, we will be likely this week. I want to say it should be this week. We will be launching an online survey for public input. So that survey we're going to send out to the public. There will be about a 2-week time frame for input to be received. That is going to be followed by something called a virtual open house. So it's not a typical special meeting of council. It's in fact a very interactive session with the public as well as stakeholders. So Nelson and Rita are working on this with our communications manager, Alex, and we are going to be tentatively setting that virtual open house for June 1st. So that is a very new update for council. Happy to share that with you. Again, tentative. Please be on the lookout for an official notice from us. And that breakout session, that virtual open house will include, that virtual open house will include breakout sessions. We want to hear from those kind of 2 big groups, the residents as well as stakeholders, such as businesses, operators of Airbnbs and short-term rentals, or future potential operators of Airbnbs. So there's a lot of things that we want to hear. What may be considered a pro for one group is a con for another. So we really want to hear all angles. Again, survey soon to be launched, virtual open house, which will be open to members of the public through registration, pre-registration. And then we're going to gather everything. We want to be able to summarize that information to you as a council so you can have that great information before you make any decisions. So we are tentatively setting a special meeting of council to hear from you, as well as to summarize what our findings are on June 21st. So that is, again, tentatively set. We've been working with the clerks division to make sure that it's open in your calendars as well. So again, summarizing not just public input, residents input, but also our stakeholders. We want to give you both angles. So short-term rentals, I hope that gives you a little flavor, Councillor Bondi, of where we're at. And Rita, Nelson, and I are happy, and Kevin are happy to receive any other additional questions you may have.
Councillor Bjorkman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, so this is, it's great news. It's great to have some timelines that we can share. There's a lot of people right now that are just, the season's been held back due to the stay-at-home order, which has helped a few people, whereas others are continuing to suffer even with the stay-at-home order, because there are short-term rental owners that don't adhere to stay-at-home order. So what I would like tonight, so again, I'm happy to see all of this moving forward, and I can report out to those residents that are concerned with it. And again, I understand we're not going to hold just to the exact dates, but at least we have a timeline. But today we have issues with short-term renters. This weekend and the weekend previous, I've had calls. I instruct people to call the OPP because there is a stay-at-home order, and that stay-at-home order states that you are not allowed to rent cottages or apartments or houses for short-term rentals who are recreational. It can only be rented to people who are in need of housing. Now, that could be somebody who has to quarantine because they've been traveling. That could be somebody who is, staying here, going to school for an extended time. So what we are seeing, people are still renting houses. There's parties going on. There's interference with people's lives, and they're bringing people in from out of town, out of the county, out of the province. The whole point of this stay-at-home order is to keep these variants from spreading. So I do have a couple questions that I want to bring to council, and if somebody else on council knows or administration can help us. So just the facts of it, there's a stay-at-home order. It's against the order to rent for leisure and short-term. We don't want people from other areas of the province with variants still generating in the GTA. So what is the direction right now for when our Essex OPP get a call, or our bylaw enforcement officer, what is the direction they're given? How do they respond to these calls?
So Councillor Bjorkman, you cut out for a bit, but I believe your question was, how does both the OPP and the town of Essex respond to a call of this nature?
That's correct.
Okay. And I know there's been some correspondence between the OPP and the town. And I'm going to let Lori and her team take over in terms of a lot of these calls are after hours and on weekends, especially with the rentals. And that's why it typically defaults to the OPP. They enforce our bylaws, noise bylaws, those types of things after hours on the weekend. So I haven't got a formalized response from the OPP in terms of the direction with respect to that question, but I'll give it up to Lori right now and her team.
Thank you, CAO Nepsi. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to be heading as well. As a recent example gave us kind of a flavor of how we work on our end. So we work with the OPP during evenings and weekends, unless council changes that direction. That our bylaw enforcement team does not work evenings or weekends to enforce these types of issues. So the OPP would be, I guess, their first line of defense here is educating. And then really, if it's a repeat offender, I think that's where you're going to find that we need to step in as the bylaw enforcement authority and issue a penalty or a fine. So I want Kevin, if you could, Kevin Carter is not only our chief building official, but he's also the manager of bylaw enforcement. One example that Kevin just came across where the OPP was involved, we follow up with the property owner on Monday, we'll say, on Monday to educate that property owner, but also to find out, was the renter indeed, on vacation, or was it an issue that the individual needed housing? I would love for Kevin to join the conversation because he's been directly involved with these types of issues.
Yes, for you, Mr. Chair. This has been an ongoing problem, especially during this pandemic. Again, we have to be fact-based. We have to gather the information, investigate, and I can assure you the OPP have been doing a fine job with that. In fact, with a repeat offender, they have laid charges within our municipality for an Airbnb. Again, as Chris mentioned earlier, most of these complaints, 95%, if not higher, are during weeknights and on weekends, which of course the OPP would have to enforce that bylaw. So we have to investigate, we have to be fact-based, and yes, there is some that are abusing the system, and I can assure you they have been charged. And the ones that are needy are quarantining or have a need for temporary housing. In fact, we have people coming this week from out of our country to visit for a funeral, I believe, and we've been forewarned, and it's legit. It's been confirmed their need. They are going to quarantine here in our municipality, which is legal. But other than that, until we get this licensing on board, that's where we'll get our real teeth even after the pandemic is over. That's it.
Okay. And thank you for that. But I want to go back to the OPP. It's their job to enforce the order of the province. The order of the province is a stay-at-home order. When a resident calls and they go to a STR and there is a building with people that are for sure not home, they're not staying at home, they are renting that place for a weekend, what are we able to tell our Essex detachment? We want you to find those people and find the owner. Like, is there what are we standing on there? That's not a bylaw enforcement thing. This is an order from the province that the OPP need to enforce. Can we demand that they enforce it?
It's a good question, Councillor Bjorkman. What I'd like to see, what I will do is resend the email I sent to the OPP, and I'll copy the Inspector Miller as well to look for response from the OPP to be able to provide council that. I'll copy council on the email as well based on our discussion tonight. I do not want to speak for the OPP. I would rather have them provide you that answer themselves.
Yeah. No, and I understand that, but I'm going to keep going back to, they work for us. They're our police force, and they represent the province. So they represent provincial orders. And I just can't see how they would not be, must enforce that law, especially considering the stay-at-home order. So I would really like to see some follow-up on that. Thank you.
Yep, I will send that out tomorrow. And that's a good point. They definitely are their contract to us, part of a larger organization. So, but I will forward that answer when I get it. Councillor Verbeek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Carter, you just popped off, and most of my questions are, actually all three of my questions are going to come to you. So I'll just throw them out there and you can answer them in order you choose. One was, I'm glad to hear that the OPP did indeed charge one of the Airbnb operators. Do you know if they charged? I'm actually going to text after this meeting, but do you know if some of the people visiting, that they're also guilty of breaking the order? I wonder if it was just the operator that was charged, or the others, because they were actually, breaking the law too by being there. My next question is about, and you kind of said something about the licensing. When we get our, our package from Lori and team about our short-term rentals, how do you feel about actually a licensing program for these? Would they help with enforcement and even communication from our bylaw department if we did have a licensing program for the operators? And my third question would be, Jake had to help me with an issue last summer with some neighborhoods and young people and repeated loud music, but it always started Friday night until Sunday. And so these homeowners in the neighborhood were having to call the police. I wonder if there's ever been a discussion about having one of our own bylaw enforcement officers on call during the weekend to deal with these type of events that require, someone to, act in a timely manner, but it is a little bit of waste of resources to have OPP running out for loud music, right? Anyway, have we ever had the discussion about having one of our own officers on bylaw enforcement on call during the weekend? And your thoughts on making looking at licensing for our short-term rental operators, please.
So I'm going to jump in, Councillor Verbeek, to answer the third question, then I'll let Kevin answer the remainder. In terms of having bylaw enforcement officers on call, that's a level of service, right? That's a level of service increase that affects your budget, that affects your staffing potentially. So it wasn't budgeted for, it's not budgeted for. If that's something, or there are definitely costs associated with that, and not just immediate costs, right? You're talking long-term costs, right? In terms of if you want another staff, there's a 4-hour minimum call out in terms of if you're sending a unionized staff out on the weekend. So the reason the OPP, they're out, they're patrolling, they're working, they're there, they're available to make those calls, depending on what priorities they're acting. So that's always been the default, and I think is the default for the majority of municipalities around here. So that's the quick answer. Kevin, please supplement, and then if you can help her to answer the other two, and then you're next, Councillor Vanderdoorn, and then Councillor.
Yes, through you, your chair. Yeah, the OPP is out there reacting to these complaints with all these Airbnbs. I can assure you of that, each and every one, on a fairly timely manner. But anyway, going back to licensing, with the pandemic, the court shut down, I mean, the provincial shut down with the COVID-19. That is enforced. Can it be better? Yes. I believe the OPP is moving more aggressively now with that. But say we're done this pandemic, we still have an issue about partying at night, the weekends, Friday night, Thursday night, whatever night. That can only be enforced through licensing. The enforcement with the noise, that'll be an OPP issue. The partying, stealing someone's wood, etc., that'll be OPP. But licensing gets to the root of it. If we get repeat complaints, they have to renew this license every year. We now are in control. We could revoke that license. They are no longer legal. So that is the enforcement aspect that we need to approach it at. Licensing is the enforcement other than ongoing noise complaints, OPP involvement, neighborhood disputes, et cetera, et cetera. We got to be able to keep them up and running or pull the plug on them. And that's only through licensing.
Does that answer your questions, Councillor Verbeek? Yes. Okay, great. Councillor Vanderdolen and then Councillor Guerin.
Yes, thank you. Through the deputy mayor, this isn't a really big issue in the sense that it affects a lot of people, but the people it affects, it's really intense. I feel very badly for them. I can't imagine living next to this stuff. But there are a lot of facets to this. On the other hand, we're very, very less forgiving today about partying than the people who are complaining to us, their parents were 50 years ago. I mean, if I think about the kind of noise that was generated at parties I was involved with in the 70s and 80s, like, man, they have to bring in SWAT teams today. So I think the tolerance level has dropped. But on the other hand, I was really disturbed by that email exchange with the OPP last week, where basically they slapped us around and said it was all our fault because we didn't have bylaws that were any good, and that these outer province people had all the right in the world to come here because they were essential workers. And so I looked that up, and I don't know if it's provincial or federal essential workers who have every right to come in here anytime they want, but federally that includes people in manufacturing, government, safety, transportation, water, food, health, finance, IT, energy, and utilities. Like, what the hell? What else is there? So in other words, 80% of the working people in the GTA and the greater Montreal area can come down here and party anytime they want in Colchester. But the retirees of Colchester are locked down and they're prisoners and they can't go anywhere, and they got to put up with the partiers from far away because they're essential workers. And the OPP says, well, you got bad bylaws, it's your fault. And the other answer is, well, we already charged them. Except they don't tell us, they don't share us, and they don't share their information with us. I mean, I don't know where this changed, but 30 or 40 years ago, every police department reported at 9 o'clock every morning, every charge, no matter how minor and who it was laid against. And now it's all a dark secret. And then when we complain, well, what the heck are you doing? Well, we charge them, but we can't tell you who it is. We can't tell you what the charge is. So a lot of this is the secrets of the OPP. We're caught in the middle. We take all of the complaints. I know they got to go out and visit the site, but we get the abuse because nobody knows what's being done because we're not being told what's being done. So this is like, there's catch-22s all over the place here, and it seems as though it's on us. I look forward to some sort of bylaw update. The complaints on this are like, how do you even answer the complaints? Well, we can't do anything. I mean, that's the most lame ass government response, and it's true. We can't do anything right now, and I feel very badly for these people. And I don't know if it's really expensive to put bylaw people on. Maybe we can fund that with the savings by switching from the OPP.
Well, that's a topic for another discussion, Councillor. But Councillor Guerin, you're next. We're at 20 minutes for this topic, so
I'll be fairly quick. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of things. Yeah, it is a problem down in Colchester for sure. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to come up with the perfect answer or one that will even appease the residents around there that have to deal with these STRs, but we have to do something. I really believe it's going to start with the bylaw and with the licensing. One question I have, and then some follow-up comments I want to make. One question I have to, I guess it'd be through to Kevin Carter. If someone gets a license for one of these STRs and we were to pull it from them and tell them you're in breach of it and we're pulling it, if they deal with Airbnb, will Airbnb themselves even acknowledge that? Or will they still allow them to put their listings up and put their posts out to rent? And then you have some STRs that do it on their own through Kijiji. They're not even part of the Airbnb. So I'm just wondering, even though we'll have that bylaw in place, we'll have that capability of taking that licensing away from them, I'm worried that they can still operate somehow around it all. So if you could just talk to that, and then I got a couple other comments.
Through you, your chair, my understanding, and this is specific to Airbnb, the corporation. Yes, if we have a bylaw that they require licensing, we can contact Airbnb and they will pull them off their site. However, I am not, and Rita may be able to help. I'm not knowledgeable with all the other companies out there, such as Airbnb, what their policies are, but I sure hope they're similar to Airbnb. But yeah, we do as a municipality have that authority, and for them to operate within our jurisdiction under the licensing, they have to be in compliance with our licensing bylaw.
Okay, I'm not sure if Rita was going to chime in there or not.
No.
If not, I'll continue. Okay, so a couple things. I'm not sure if any other councils have done it. I'm not sure if admin's doing it. We're getting calls and we're getting having conversations with residents regarding all these issues that are going on there with the STRs. And we have Lori's department working on bylaws and that. Are we speaking with any of these STR owners? I spoke with 3 on the weekend, and the information I got from them was positive. They don't speak for all of them. They don't represent all of the ones that own STRs. But the ones I spoke to who are from Essex, who own in Kingsville, and I was speaking with you briefly about it, Laurie, earlier, but we got cut off a couple of times. But I hope we are reaching out to these STR owners as well and finding out. He told me some things that were kind of surprising to me too. That they don't want some of the stuff that the residents are complaining about neither. So they've installed stuff like doorbell cameras. And so as soon as somebody walks up to that door, they get a ding on their phone. They know who's coming up. And if it's not a person on the contract, or if they already know there's already X amount of people allowed in there and there's more, they get a phone call right away, the person that's renting that. And they also communicate with their neighbors. They know they don't want to be that person that has a rental unit and is getting all kinds of complaints. But where I was really, really shocked and surprised was I thought that a lot of these STR owners, had to spend thousands of dollars a year just on insurance on their renters and liability and property damage. It's nothing. It's just part of their little 3% fee they pay to Airbnb, and all that insurance and stuff is covered. Literally, Airbnb puts that listing up there. The person renting pays that 18% fee to Airbnb. The person that's renting the unit out, they paid a little 3% fee to have all the bookings done and any insurance. I was flabbergasted. So I can see some owners of these STRs going, I don't really care if I get damage. I just simply put a call into Airbnb and I get the insurance claim going. And that bothers me, because that tells me that some of these owners just may not care about their property at all. And they're from maybe another municipality and they're renting these out. So lots of moving parts, but I would encourage counselors, if you haven't yet, please reach out to anybody that you may or may not know that own an STR and find out what their experiences are with how they do their business and conduct their business. It'd also be nice, I'm sure administration has done that due diligence, but it'd also be nice that if our upper governments would start putting a little more controls on these and helping us out too. I mean, really, that's kind of, if the provincial government comes on board and they start putting some better regulations on these things, then I think that will just be a trickle-down effect to all municipalities and will help make our lives a little bit easier and our residents' lives a little easier. But big problem, big topic. We need to find an end to it soon, because we have many residents that they're living with this nightly. And I will say this, just in addition, a lot of the complaints that we do get can come from our own subdivisions that we live in. We do have people that fight. They have neighbors, they have fence wars, they have fights over water staying off their property. fireworks, people partying all the time. So the problem there, though, that if it's your neighbor that you lives in your next to you in your subdivision, you've got them forever, like for as long as they want to be there. The STRs, they can move out, they get a new one in every weekend. That's the only saving grace that you have. And hope, but sounds like to me what we're getting down in Colchester, at least this one particular Airbnb rental is a repeat every weekend of basically the same thing, like Groundhog Day, the exact same thing, different people, same problem. So anyways, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Guerin. I think just to confirm, I believe we followed up with the STR that on the Monday. What didn't we, Lori? After that weekend?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. Passionate discussion there. Moving on to the next topic is the actually, Councillor Guerin, it's yours. The property standards bylaw. Just maybe some details or where you want to head or what do you want to see with this?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, through you, Mr. Chair. It's been a while since the original list. But I was speaking to Lori a little bit about today. It's not any one particular thing that I can think of off the top of my head, specifically, but it's just them ongoing things that we deal with. And is there any way we can improve the communication with our residents? They call the counselors and want to know about this and about that. So a couple of things like, I'm always getting the concerns about the auto wreckers' continued lack of respect for their neighboring residents. I know our bylaw enforcement, our police have been there. Myself and Councilor Vanderbilt and the mayor have been there to discuss with them. And it's one of those things where, yeah, we'll do this. And then they do it for about a weekend and then it's back to the same old stuff, right? So there's that part of it. We have some private properties, be it Maplewood Apartments, be it the Viscount, it could be the cooperative like Orchard Park when their elevator broke down. I think this may have been when they're stemmed from. And we have residents say, we voted for you, but we don't pay taxes per se, but we voted for you. We're allowed to vote. And the town can't do anything about an elevator broke down or something, a property standard like that, where it might be an issue with health or anything along those lines, or safety, security cameras, all those different types of things. So a little bit of a vent here on my end, because I really didn't really know exactly specifically what I was putting to this, but we're all dealing with them. Just wondering if there's anything we can do on some of these, even private properties, like, I like take the dollhouse, for instance. I was flabbergasted that it took all these years and all of a sudden there's a problem there and we have to evict these tenants, but that building hasn't, from my knowledge, hasn't changed anything, the way the stairs are or how it's built or what's going on in there for a long time. So I'm not sure how even that complaint comes forward now. And now it's a problem versus why it wasn't dealt with before. I'm assuming it's always complaint driven, and maybe there was never a complaint on it, but those are the type of property standard stuff that I keep dealing with on an ongoing basis, and everyone else is. I'm just trying to find ways that I want to be able to tell our residents, even though you're on a private property, even though you're in a Viscount, there's something we can do for you maybe. Like I just heard the other day that if you live in a Viscount estates, the police have they're very limited on what they can control in there. They can't get you for speeding. They can't get you they can't do anything about patrolling for safety, I'm understanding. And again, I'd like to reach out to OPP myself and verify some of that stuff. But just what I'm getting relayed by the residents is that it's almost like when they drive into that section of our town, into that private property, everything kind of stops for them. And that's their feeling. And I want to be able to tell them more than just, yeah, well, too bad, it's private property, call your landlord. Tell them to get a private security company in there to make sure people are obeying speed limits and stuff like that. So that's my rant, and I'll listen in.
Okay. That was there's a lot there. You went from I tried to take notes, Councillor Guerin. I mean, in terms of speeding at the end, property standards bylaw, but I think I get where you were going in terms of Viscount is an entire property on its own, and speeding ties into that. Some of the other topics I'm just generalizing, but there's perceived safety issues, right? In terms of if the elevator's out, well, that can be deemed a safety issue or an inconvenience, but it's not a safety issue if they have other means of access and egress, right? So there's the law that comes in there and the building code, and then there's perceived inconveniences. I think so. Just in terms of wording, I think in perception from our public, because I think in that one in particular, they were hammering us on why aren't we doing anything? Their elevators down. There's nothing we could do or nothing we had to do, to speak frankly, that way. So I'm going to let, I guess, Lori go, and then I'm sure she's going to give it to Kevin to supplement. But property standards it's a tough one, right? It's the timing of it. Sometimes, people don't like the timing. You have to give people their due diligence, and they have to have that time to fix things or the time to appeal things, and like you said, it is complaint driven. So you can have a structure that can be standing, potentially dilapidated and falling down inside. But if we don't know, we don't know. But the minute we find out, we act. And that's kind of what happened in the dollhouse. There was a point and a pivot that allowed us to do something. So Lori, enough of my rant.
That's okay. Thanks, Chris, and through you to Councillor Guerin. Yeah, lots of things I heard. So just to clarify, however, it's what I heard was more than just the property standards bylaw. So something that I think Kevin is going to speak to is there's an opportunity for us to enforce our municipal bylaw, but there is a duty for our municipality to also enforce the Ontario Building Code, where there are deficiencies in structures, where there are maybe issues related to post-construction. So yes, a lot of the issues that we deal with are complaint driven. It's we just don't have the resources to be knocking on doors and asking, where things are at in the real world. So complaints that are received, where the first thing we always do is investigate. When we open up a ticket or through report a problem, we investigate. I've seen Kevin in action before Mike Deemer, our new bylaw enforcement officer, came on board. I've seen Jake in action as well. We are always wanting to be, number one, educating. Number two, also seeking voluntary compliance. So we want to show, just in case it gets to the courts, we want to show our judge and jury that we've done everything to work with the property owners, whether it's a building code issue or a property standards issue. So Kevin, I'd love for you to join this conversation. I do see Councillor Guerin's hand up though, Chris.
I just want to intervene quickly. So when you're saying that, I guess if you can clarify yourself or Kevin, when you say if it's building related and it's something along those lines, we can intervene. Are you talking about even on properties I spoke about? For example, if there's a person living in a trailer in the Viscount Estates, and that person that's living there feels that trailer is an issue, and let's say they're subleasing or something along those lines, or if it's somebody that's living in an apartment building that's privately owned, and they feel there's an issue, can we go in there and do something about it? Or do we have to say, sorry, call your landlord, he owns the building, not us?
Go for it, Kevin.
Through you, your chair. Yes, in those certain circumstances, we have full control of that, both through the Ontario Building Code, but more so through the property standards. We have a standard of living within your home and outside your home, the beautiness of your yard, as well as your safety within a dwelling. If a proponent were to call us and say, hey, I have no heat in my house, yes, we're the ones that they'll take care of that through the Landlord-Tenant Act. We get a call, I feel I'm going to fall through my shower floor. My landlord's not doing anything. Yes, through property standards, we have that covered. We do have the authority to make those repairs and place it on the taxes of the landlord. Yeah, but going back to in this day and age, with the courts being shut down, it's made it a bit more of a maneuvering aspect for bylaw. To write a charge knowing that it's going to be 2 years to be heard, the courts, when they do get back online, it's going to take at least 2.5 years, we're being told, just to get caught up on the docket. So we're trying new ways to approach a lot of these issues through going right directly to the owners, not the renters, talking to the owners of the property that they're the ones that are actually going to get the charge. trying to persuade them to have their tenants fix this up. And the one specifically I'm talking about, I don't want to mention names, but it is in downtown Essex, which we get repeat complaints. We have taken that avenue and it has worked for this week. But next week, like Councillor Grant said, they fall off the wagon and we're back to babysitting again. We have gone through that maneuver numerous times, which now we're at the point we are going to lay those charges. And it may take 2-3 years to be heard in the courts via appeals. But yeah, we start off voluntary compliance, then, notices where we can, not necessarily under snow removal or grass, tall grass, because there's some people that have vacant lots. There is no way to notify them. So we just clean the snow, cut the grass, and place it on their taxes. But where they are, or if there is a tenant there, we will leave a notice or try to make an attempt before we cut their grass or remove their snow. But yeah, it's a different way of enforcement, site-specific, and on what the case is, if that helps.
Councillor Guerin, does that help?
Yeah, I'm getting most of that. I agree. I understand most of it. So just again, back to like a private property like the Viscount Estates, everybody in there has to be upheld by the same property standards. So if there's a person in there that says my neighbor's not cutting his grass, my other neighbor's doing this, we can go in.
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, I think though, just to be specific, it's the property standards that are set for the town, right? And it's not, it's because they're one big private property, just to differentiate between what I think your property should look like and what the town thinks your property should look like. There's a lot of times that's two different things. Anyone else want to jump in on property standards bylaw? No, nobody. Okay, next one. I know we touched on this a little bit, but I think maybe Councillor Bondi, I believe. Yeah, if there's some more detail that you want to drive out of this. Development fees on semi-detached.
I think we discussed it earlier, so let's move on.
Sure. Does anyone have anything else before I move on that they want to touch on that topic? No? Okay, moving on. Wayfinding signage. Councillor Bondi.
Thank you. This is just still something, I know we have some good wayfinding signage coming, but I got a call from Chuck McDonald, the other day, a Legion member in Harrow, saying, when people come to Harrow, they still don't know, right? There's still a lot of confusion. I know that Harrow is Essex, but people that are looking for places in Harrow, they want to see a sign that says this way to Harrow. And it falls into cycling, it falls into everything else too. Wayfinding signage, I did have a work order in with Town Hall because on Erie, where Gore hits, that was another one, right? Like, I think we still need this wayfinding signage, and I think residents are still confused. So that's it.
Roy, have a few comments, please.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Nepsey. So yes, we do have the wayfinding signage project that's still ongoing. When I mean ongoing, you've probably seen some of the installation on wayfinding in Colchester and McGregor. Those signs are up. However, there are other signs that are being proposed, or rather that have been earmarked at certain locations within Harrow Centre and Essex Centre. Those signs, the installation of those signs, will coincide with the streetscaping project, so as not to have to install, then remove, then reinstall. So the locations of those, we've got our project manager, Nelson Silvera, who is here as well. If you're interested in certain locations, we can talk about those. Something to be mindful of, however, the wayfinding signage project, it's a municipal project. We don't have any private enterprises, entities, commercial restaurants or wineries, specific wineries on those wayfinding signs. So it is Colchester turn left, or Town Hall turn right, or our community centers, those types of points of interest. Nelson, is there anything you want to add before we give the floor back to council?
No, I think you, through you, Mr. Chair, sorry. I think you touched on it, Lori. Like you said, signs in Colchester, signs in McGregor, signs pending with the streetscape project in Harrow and in Essex. The signs are for municipal points of interest. So you look at Town Hall, like you said, and the community centers. But when you touch on attractions or businesses, I think council is aware, and we had mentioned it in an email a few months back, maybe last year already, that the county and Tourism Windsor Essex Pele Island will be working on a countywide signage strategy as it relates to tourism signage. So, the old blue and white signs that say, this specific business this way, this business that way, or this museum in this direction. They're looking for a more unified approach in terms of having matching signage for county tourism destinations. And that should be completed by the end of this year. They're currently working on that. But yeah, back to the municipal wayfinding signage, just municipal points of interest on those signs. And pending the Harrow and Essex streetscape plans or projects as well.
Councillor Verbeek.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I have a comment and a question. So my father used to come here all the time from Maidstone, and I'm talking like 4 times a week, and 3 of them he would lose his way and get confused. And I was reminded of that last week when I was out walking, and some fella pulled over to talk to me and asked, he's like, I have no idea where I am. He's like, I'm trying to find Guesto. And I said, okay, so this, this way is to Harrow and this way is, I'm just wondering what our criteria is for these, because somewhere like County Road 15 and 12 would be perfect, for this way is to the new fire hall, this way is to Harrow, this is to McGregor, and this is to Essex. Because when you are out here and you get turned around, even if you're like my father, his problem was that he's always been directionally challenged, but he knew the area and he could still get turned around and say, I don't even know which way, this town is. But I just wonder what the criteria is, because we do have a few places, like I say, on the outskirts of Guesto that would really help people when they're wandering around out here. Oh, Essex is back there, and that way's to McGregor, and pointing down 15 towards Harrow. That would be a great use for these wayfinding signs, and just what is the criteria to get something like that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll start with a little bit of background. I mean, the original way this was structured is that we received grant money from from OMAFRA, who then funneled the grant money through AMO through the Main Street Revitalization Project, and those funds paid for the initial wayfinding signs, or the white posts you see in the downtowns, and they're mainly for centers. They wanted them in downtown centers. So when you start going into the rural areas, that program didn't cover that. Now, if council wants to potentially look at that approach in signs in the rural areas or rural hamlets, then that's potentially an option down the line. But the original funding for those poles were only covered by the Main Street Revitalization Program. So that's why we stuck to originally in the centers. And yeah, I guess that's really the main reasoning behind it.
I can supplement before we go to you, Councillor Vanderdoen, even going farther back, when we did our rebranding with the current logo and the wave that we have, with that came a whole wayfinding signage package. And it was discussed heavily a number of times with council, back and forth, and never could land how much or where. So part of that has been incorporated in what Nelson has successfully applied for in that grant in terms of the course. But we do have, I guess, a rendering of that map that shows, Harrow, Essex, Colchester, depending where you're at. We had some large signs outside of the municipality, but those are typically on county roads, and that's where it seems to be an issue on county roads because they're trying to limit the number of signs or trying to do something regionally, and nothing could. So there's quite a bit of history there, Councillor Verbeek. And next time you're in, or I can pop by and show you what we had, and maybe that's something you want to resurrect, following or in next year's budget. Vanderdoen, you were next.
Thank you. Through the chair. Well, obviously signs are just, absolutely crucial to the functioning of society and commerce, but we've talked about that for days. A pet peeve about signs that's bugged me for the 20 years I've lived out here, 21 years. So when you come down Yarner Town line, the Essex side of the road has all the roads are marked. The Kingsville side, there's no signs. They have a couple of signs like Colasantes or Jack Miners, but there's no road signs. How could a town not have road signs on a major county route where half the people come to the town? I don't get it. I don't know. Maybe Director Chadwick could put a knife into them at some meeting, or, well, wait, that's probably Nepsy style. You can make a joke out of it, but something has to be said to Kingsville about, can you, spend $1,000 and put up some signs that you haven't had for 2 decades? I'm glad I've got that off my chest.
Maybe we can, maybe you can get invited to their roundtable. Or they can put signs on their TELUS towers. I don't know, but that was too soon, I think, but sorry. Okay, so Councillor Bondi, you're not, I don't see you there. I see your name there. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add on wayfinding signage, or no, you're muted still, sorry. 1 minute you need?
Sorry, yeah, I have to go because I have to pick up Gwen at daycare by 5:30. I just wanted to have the conversation, so thank you.
Oh, okay, no problem. Okay. Okay, so I think she has to go, but the next discussion was for Councillor Bonnie as well, cycling presentations. I know we're coming up to 5:30, but maybe we'll skip over then. Councillor Guerin, you had Maplewood Apartments, and then if we have time, we'll get back, but I'm not sure how much more time we'll have left. Like I said.
For you, Mr. Chair, I can defer. I don't need to talk about that because new information over the last little bit I've come in, and it's all good. You can move on to the next one.
Okay. Okay. So the next one then is Deputy Mayor Meloche. We had a discussion about growing Essex into neighboring municipalities. Deputy Mayor Meloche.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I brought this up in partial to items like this new TELUS tower that's being proposed for Kingsville on the edge of our urban center for Ward 1 in Essex. And I know at one point in time we thought that we didn't want to grow residential on the other side of number 3, and we thought it was going to be forever before we would get to a point where we would have to have a discussion or think about that. But we are basically landlocked on this side of number 3 highway for any residential development. And I brought it up to the CAO that we should have a conversation as council to talk about what we want to do so that our administration can plan out infrastructure properly. So, if we're talking about a 20-year horizon, in talking to the Valente family, they're suspecting that a lot of what their construction is going to be for residential over the next few years could potentially be done in 10 years from now. So if it does go that fast, if we're looking at a 20-year horizon, we should be looking right now at some of what we want to do potentially for next residential areas. And I don't know if that means going further into Ward 2 to try and perhaps have, next to the parkland that we've purchased, or across the street from that. But we do have a lot of industrial out that way. Perhaps we want to stay on this side of number 3 highway and continue on. So we'd either have to look at having conversations with either Kingsville or Lakeshore. And that's a conversation that I'd like to have with the rest of council so that administration has an idea of what direction that we're talking about. And I don't know if which comes first, administration having a discussion and seeing what fits best with infrastructure, or whether it comes with council and council saying, we think that the next developments as far as a residential area should be in a prescribed area. So I just wanted to bring that up to council. And then I don't know if, Mr. Nepsy, I don't know if we're talking about trying to potentially get lands from another municipality, whether that should be closed session or whether that should be talked about in open session.
Deputy Mayor, yeah, I think when we get into the details of it, absolutely, that would have to move into close. I mean, obviously, that protects the municipalities, protects both municipalities in terms of that. But I think for now, in terms of general discussion, it's excellent for council to really wrap their head around it and start thinking about it. But I'm going to go over to Director Chadwick and let her give, there's settlement areas and time for that to happen and what happens after that. And I'll let her go.
Thank you, Sayo Nepsy. Exactly where I was going to go with that. Deputy Mayor Malash, a great conversation we had not too long ago, as well as with Councillor Guerin and others on the same topic. So I think the first thing we need to do is identify what our needs are over the next 20 years. So our official plan is the document that does just that. So we have a certain number of acres or hectares of residential land and availability of that residential land over the next 20 years. We have data that's going to be crunched in the very near future alongside the county. So the County of Essex is doing their OP review and is embarking on a portion of what we would be doing in that OP review ourselves, which is that data crunching in each of our settlement areas. So we also have secondary settlement areas, which we talked about not too long ago, McGregor and Colchester. So this primary settlement areas, it looks like we're busting at the seams in Essex. It looks like we're busting at the seams in Harrow. And those secondary settlement areas, not so much, very difficult to justify the expansion of a secondary settlement area. But the primary settlement areas, sure, the land may be designated and maybe it's held by one particular developer or a couple of developers, but is that enough land to take the municipality using our projected population forecast to the next 20 years? Do we have even enough employment lands, which is commercial and industrial? So all of that, I think, will be a part of, should be a part of any justification before we ever embark on any questions of expanding those settlement areas into either our own municipality, such as south of Highway 3, or into other municipalities. So just as a tidbit of information that I shared with a couple of the councillors here, the process to annex lands is under the Municipal Act. So it's not a planning exercise, it is under the Municipal Act and is governed through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing at the province. It's an onerous process. Annexation is not easy, and it needs a lot of justification to be able to prove that we need lands outside our own municipality. Thank you.
Councillor Vanderloon?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I wasn't sure what this topic meant by the title, but I'm really glad the deputy mayor brought it up. It's really important. You drive around Essex Center and you think to yourself, well, why isn't something being built there? And that would be perfect for another subdivision or a couple more streets. But it's not unless you know the boundaries of the local communities, you realize it's impossible unless something changes. As Director Chadwick was saying, this is a really long process. I went through it as a reporter in Windsor when Windsor annexed that 3,400 acres from Tecumseh, and it took, I think it was 5 to 10 years. So you've got to, we got to put a stake in the sand now saying, and actually this is an ideal time because with the housing crisis, this gives us leverage. Look, we have a housing crisis, we need this, but we need to put our stake in the sand now saying we might need a few, we don't need a lot, I don't think, but we might need a little bit around the edges of Essex for residential, because I think we have enough on the south side for the employment lands, even though that'll take just as long to expand through the municipal act as the other. But we got to start now. I've been keeping a really close eye on that Valente project, Townsview Estates behind the Canadian Tire, and he's only supposed to be building about 2 streets, but it looks like he's building 5 right now. He's got like 10 pieces of heavy equipment. He's going full bore. You know, I say he, I mean they, the Valente group, and you know, I think they could easily build more than 100 of the houses this year. It could go very fast. I think 10 years will be built out. That's being generous. I think we're going to be built out a lot sooner than that. So we should start this process about looking to grow the crucial communities that we have to into the nearby. Well, we have to start the negotiations anyway. Thanks.
Good. Yeah, just to note, the Townsview, the reason why it looks like they're constructing so much is the layout of their development, and that's part of the reason that development financing. Their stormwater pond is on one end of the development, and their first phase is on the other end. So they've got to build all the infrastructure to get there. So they're definitely moving a ton of earth. If anyone's gone for a walk on the Greenway, whew, that's a lot of land, which is great to see. But between them and the MTO.
Just to clarify, that's Essex Town Center.
Oh, Essex Town Center. Sorry. Thank you. Councillor Guerin.
That's you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. So my last conversation I had with Mr. Valente was very positive. I mean, their first phases they're doing, which I want to say was about 150 units. And he said that they are all bought up in terms of the companies that are going to be building the homes have already bought the properties. So he thinks it's going to be quite quick too. But I agree with Councillor Van Allen. It's going to be a little quicker than we think. And here's the deal, though. Not everybody wants that development there. Not everyone wants to move into that development. I've heard some comments about particular builders that maybe work under the Valente flagship that people don't, there's no choices outside of that development right now for people in Ward 1. But depending on how our sports complex goes and when that happens, we have some town-owned property on Fairview that have ball diamonds and sport and soccer fields on them right now that I can see being sold off as residential properties versus leaving them as recreational. If we're going to spend millions of dollars across the highway, then let's put the stuff over there. Let's take that property we have between Hanlon Street and the, I would say up to even the old field house, back out to the field that Valente is going to be developing off Gosfield, and you can get quite a few homes in there. And I think that really the residents in that area would like the idea of homes going in there. They've lived for years with the ball diamond and the lights and et cetera, and it's all good, but time is moving on, and that might be an opportunity for the town to get some money in and to have another development that's right under our nose. So yeah, I mean, lots of good things going on.
Thanks, Councillor Guerin. So I think in terms of step one, Deputy Mayor Meloche, as Laurie noted, it's getting that OP review, right? No, have where that's laid out, and that's happening right now. So that's happening, I mean, within ours and the county. So is there anything further that you're looking for? Do you want to have additional discussions on it?
No, I'm good. That's it. Thanks.
Laurie, anything else to wrap up on that, or we're good?
On the topic, yeah, the OP review, yes, the county is embarking on theirs. We're using their data on a parallel track. The town is working on the RFP to be able to retain a consultant to help us with our own OP review. It will be initiated this year, and it's anticipated that's going to take about 1.5 years to be completed. So it will roll over into 2022. That project is a 5-year OP review. Again, because we're taking data from the county to help us with that project, is not going to be snap of a finger completed, but it will give us the basis and the foundation for us to have these conversations and continue this conversation on our own settlement areas, whether we expand internally or externally.
Excellent information. Okay, we're at 5:30. I know we got through quite a few topics, not all of them. But we can maybe, what I'm thinking is at the end, wrap up of topics. I mean, the next discussion group is corporate services, and then office of the CAO. But I think we might be able to bring back these items then and kind of do a free for all. So with that, again, thank you. Excellent discussion. I really appreciate it. The insight is great for us. So thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on behalf of the presiding officer of the committee, or back to council, that there were no recommendations to council that were duly passed by resolution during the committee of the whole. And with that, Mr. Chair, Mr. Deputy Mayor, we'd be looking for council to pass a motion to receive the Risen report.
Looking for a motion, moved by Councillor Vanderdolen, supported by Councillor Guerin. All in favor? That's carried. And I don't believe there's any new business, so I'm looking for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Bowman, supported by Councillor Bjorkman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening.